أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لكل جعلنا منكم شرعة ومنهاجا ولو شاء الله لجعلكم أمة واحدة ولكن ليبلوكم فيما آتاكم صدق الله العلي العظيم. Again, for the barakat of this majlis, let's begin our majlis by reciting dua faraj to hasten the reappearance of the master of our time, Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوات على محمد. Before we begin our discussion, this dua faraj that we recite, it has a specific association with the day of Friday. The day of Friday for mu'mineen is a day that's spent in two conditions. One is anticipation and the other is sorrow. Why? The anticipation is that when we start this Friday, we know that Friday is the day that it could be that our Imam comes to us and his dhuhur comes. So we begin this day with a day of anticipation, a day of hope. And that hope is that connection that we have between us and our Imam, that every time a Friday comes, we're anticipating this could be it, could be today. There's no limit or restriction to say that Allah has to make events happen at a certain point in time. If Allah should choose, He can make it happen at any moment and any time. The sorrow comes when the evening time sets in. And the evening comes, and we see that that time where my Imam could have come has left me and my Imam didn't come. And that sorrow sets in that it could have been today and it wasn't today. So inshallah, we make this dua, and remember something, every time you make dua sincerely for the hastening of Imam Zaman, it has an impact. There is no time where you make dua for Imam Zaman that it doesn't have an impact. It always has an impact. And understand something, it is the affairs of the mu'mineen that delayed this dhuhur to begin with. It's an aside. You guys okay? We'll talk about Imam Zaman for a minute, then we'll move on. You guys good? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The faraj of Imam Zaman, the coming of Imam Zaman, was something that was actually declared in history and known. That we knew at a certain time, 70 years or 100 years after Hijrah, that the Imam was going to come. And then it was the actions of the people where they told the secrets of the Ahlul Bayt, they declared the affairs of the Ahlul Bayt, and they behaved in inappropriate fashions, that the dhuhur was postponed. And then again, when people then went out and they disturbed the affairs of Islam, they disturbed the process of information, they shared information that they weren't supposed to, they acted in ways that they weren't supposed to, the faraj of Imam Zaman was put off for a second time. After that, the Ahlul Bayt tell us that now Allah has not given us the time frame of when Imam Zaman will come. And that now the affair is completely in His hand, and no one can tell you when Imam will come, and if they tell you when the Imam will come, they're liars. Nobody knows. The point of this narration and sharing this is a fewfold. One, is that as we are the ones who are responsible for putting off the dhuhr of the imam because of our actions and our behaviors, not we in specific, we in general, the mu'mineen, the ones who are attached to the affair of Ahlul Bayt, they are the ones who behaved inappropriately, so the faraj was pushed off. So meaning now, if we want to hasten that time period, we as the ummah again are the ones who bear the responsibility to call to the imam and change our character to make it appropriate for the imam to come. The second point is that the fundamental behind what caused the problem was sharing inappropriate information in inappropriate places. You see, in the past 20 years, with the use of the internet and social media, we've again opened the doors of communication and opened the doors of exposure. And we've allowed everybody into our communities and into our conversations. And what that's done is that's forced a sense of censorship upon this pulpit and upon this community to ensure that the communication here is universally appropriate and does not in any way cause harm or conflict to the religion of Islam. Now, using this pulpit to invite people and to discuss affairs that are appropriate for all of humanity and society and to invite people is an appropriate thing, is a good thing. But as with every household affair, it doesn't need to be done in public. When we teach our children, for example, about our finances, or for example, the etiquette of making our bed, or for the example, the etiquette of using the bathroom, or how to eat, we don't do it in public. We don't sit them down and say, hey people, watch me as I teach my child how to behave appropriately. What do we say? These are affairs of the household. We need to have a closed environment where we can discuss certain affairs to appropriate the etiquette so that my child behaves in a fashion that I am pleased with. This same way, this community center, this Husayniyah, has twofold responsibility. One is it's the face of Islam in this society and promotes Islam and invites people to Islam. But at the same point in time, it is our spiritual hospital and our spiritual home where we educate the next generation on how to behave. Therefore, not every conversation is meant to be publicized. Not every conversation that we have here should be made public for everyone to see. And we need to have a discretionary process to prepare that so that we don't do a disservice to the imam. Without mujamila, without exaggeration. Today someone contacted me and they said to me, I was listening to a scholar, I thought he was very good, and then he said something foolish and I was done with him and I will never listen to him again. I said, okay, what happened? And the reply came that he said that the imams are greater than all of the anbiya. That same Shia rhetoric that they throw out there that means nothing. And he disrupted the pulpit, and therefore, I don't believe in this individual and I don't believe in that pulpit anymore. And the answer to that was, well, technically he didn't say anything wrong. He just didn't teach you how to interpret and understand this statement. He made a statement without explaining it. And that's the problem. When we utilize this pulpit, and when we present this kind of an argument, we have to qualify the individuals who are listening to it. And we have to qualify that the people who are listening to it are capable of understanding the characteristics that are described and what the purpose and the functionality of this pulpit is, and that the people who are listening can appreciate the comments that are made. Now, the particular comment that this scholar made and said that the Aim are greater than the Anbiya, it's true, with the exception of our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? And I'll explain it to you, because our children are present and they need to understand these things as well too. Every Nabi who came with the purpose of preparing this world for the dhuhr of our Holy Prophet. The responsibility was to build every ummah to the point where they could accept and appreciate the message of Rasulullah. And once the pinnacle of that message was brought by Rasulullah, then after that the responsibility of the A'immah was to protect that message and ensure that that message was not corrupted. So by the simple fundamental of the availability of information, the one who prepares for the message has not received the message yet. The one who prepares the world for the message of Rasulullah has not seen Rahmatul lil Alameen yet. Therefore his job of preparing is important, but it doesn't equal the responsibility of Rasulullah. But the Imam who comes after Rasulullah must have access to the message of Rasulullah in its entirety so that he can protect it. Therefore we say that the Imam in status is greater than the Anbiya because his responsibility is to protect the complete message that came with Rasulullah. The example of this is given by a narration of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. You guys want to hear some fadail? If at the end I don't hear a nara, I'm not going to recite it. You guys going to give me a nara at the end?
Sure.
Amir al-Mu'mineen on the 20th of Ramadan, after he had been struck by Ibn Muljim, made a call to all of his companions again and said, if any of you have any questions, come and ask me now before I leave this world. And when Amir al-Mu'mineen was on his deathbed, after he had been struck by Ibn Muljim, they described his condition that they had put a yellow turban on his head, but the face of Amir al-Mu'mineen was more yellow than the turban that was on his head. He was that sick. One of the companions by the name of Sa'sa bin Sohan, Sa'sa, who was a sincere companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, came to see Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he said, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, I have some questions for you before you leave us." And Amir al-Mu'mineen said, "Sa'sa, ask me." So Sa'sa says, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, who is greater, you or Adam alayhi salam?" Amir al-Mu'mineen says that typically I don't like that one should boast, but Allah says, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, that when Allah gives you some ni'mat, some bounties, announce them, tell people so that they can appreciate the bounties of Allah. So Sa'sa, I will answer your questions. I am greater than Adam alayhi salam. Sa'sa says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, how are you greater than Adam? Amir al-Mu'mineen replies that Adam was forbidden from eating from the tree. What he was forbidden from eating was wheat. Sa'sa, Adam ate the wheat when he was not supposed to. Yet I tell you, myself and Rasulullah have never eaten wheat in our entire life. Therefore, though it was not wajib on me to abstain from wheat, I abstained from wheat, and therefore I am greater than Adam, because Adam shouldn't have eaten it and he ate it. So therefore I am greater. So Sa'sa says, okay, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, who is greater? You are greater or Nuh is greater? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I am greater than Nabi Nuh. Sa'sa says, how? Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, he says, Sa'sa, Nuh was a prophet who preached to a nation, and the nation abused him. And therefore Nuh turned to Allah and called to Allah and said, Oh Allah, send your adhab on these people. Sa'sa, this nation, this ummah has abused me more than Nuh was abused by his ummah. Yet I never once asked Allah to curse these people. Therefore, I am greater than Nuh alayhi salam. So Sa'sa says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, are you greater or is Ibrahim greater? And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I am greater than Ibrahim. Sa'sa says, how are you greater than Ibrahim? Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, he says, in the Quran, in Surah Baqarah, you read that Nabi Ibrahim asked Allah, Rabbi, arini kayfa tuhyi al-mawta. Oh Allah, show me how do you bring something that's dead back to life? And Allah asked him, awala tu'min? Oh Ibrahim, you don't have faith in me that I can make something come back to life? Ibrahim said, Bala, walakin liyatma'inna qalbi. Yes, oh Allah, I believe in you. And this is in the Quran, in Surah Baqarah. I believe in you that you can make something dead come back to life. But so that my heart has itminan and certainty, Allah, show me how you bring something dead back to life. And then the story continues that Allah told Ibrahim, take 4 of these different birds, teach them to respond to your call, then cut them into pieces, put them on 4 mountains, and then call to them and they will come back to you alive. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, oh Sa'sa, Ibrahim needed to see something that was dead come back to life, to have certainty that Allah can bring something that's dead back to life. Yet I tell you, Sa'sa, if Allah removed all of the curtains from before my eyes and hid nothing from me in all of His creation, not an iota of difference would come in my certainty in the power of Allah. Therefore, I am greater than Ibrahim. Sa'sa continues, Ulul Azm Anbiya, the great 5 prophets. We did 3 of them, right? We did Nabi Adam, Nabi Nuh, Nabi Ibrahim. Who's next? Who's next? Musa, Nabi Musa. So Sa'sa says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, who's greater? Are you greater or is Musa greater? Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, I am greater than Musa. Sa'sa says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, teach me how, why are you greater than Musa? He says, read in the Quran, when Allah told Musa and gave him the revelation and said, go to Fir'aun and announce it, Musa alayhi salam turned and said, oh Allah, I have killed one of the supporters of Fir'aun and I'm afraid that they should attack me. Send my brother with me as a security when I go to present in front of Fir'aun. Sa'sa, when Surah Al-Bara'ah was given to me to go and recite to the people of Makkah, there was not a household in Makkah where I had not killed one of their relatives. But yet I was not afraid of the people and I went alone to recite the message of Allah. Therefore, I am greater than Musa. So Sa'sa says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, who is greater, you or Nabi Isa? And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I am greater than Isa. How? Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, he says, O Sa'sa, when Maryam was going to give birth to Isa, she was sitting in the masjid. And Jibreel came to her and said, Oh Maryam, this is the place of worship, not the place of giving birth. You must leave here to give birth to Isa. Yet when my mother Fatima bint Asad went to the Kaaba and asked Allah for the assistance of Allah in the birthing of my birth, Allah opened the Kaaba and said, Fatima, come in. This is the place where Ali will be born. Ali. Thank you. Therefore, I am greater than Isa. The point of this narration is to show that Amir al-Mu'mineen is explaining the status of the A'imma alayhimus salam, the Imams, is greater than all of the Anbiya except the example of Rasulullah. And that each of them, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, when you look at me in comparison to Rasulullah, Ana abdum min abidi Rasulullah. I am but one slave from amongst the slaves of Rasulullah. There is no one who is equal to our Holy Prophet. And in the coming nights we'll inshallah discuss the ma'rifat and understanding of who our Prophet was. But the authority of each of our Imams that comes from their association and relationship to our Holy Prophet, which is why they would say, Awwaluna Muhammad, Awsatuna Muhammad, Akhiruna Muhammad, Kulluna Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Which is why these ahadith and their likes are conversations that we need to have with our children to give them the tarbiyat of what is their faith and what is their religion. But one who doesn't understand this point, one who can't appreciate the ma'rifat of Ahlul Bayt, to share this kind of a hadith with him would actually do a disservice to Islam, where they would begin to misunderstand and misinterpret and say that this is the religion of the exaggerators. They don't understand what the true religion is. Which is why one is the responsibility of the speaker to ensure that he qualifies the statements and prepares the audience to appreciate what he's teaching. And two, that the audience self-censors to ensure that the message reaches appropriate people and not every people. Which is why that's our discussion of tonight. The discussion of tonight is around clarifying the doubt of what is Sharia. The purpose that this is even a conversation that we need to have is exactly the reason that people have misshared information and publicized things that don't belong in the public sphere and they've been misunderstood. We need to answer this question, what is Sharia? Because at this point in time, we live in a country that is afraid that this concept of Sharia law is going to come in and take over their societies. And the assumption that this Sharia law, and I put it in quotes because it's a misused phrase, is something that implies that Muslim people want to come in and force their ideology upon society. And that's not true. If we understood what is Sharia, what is the purpose of this, how it was established and how it was laid out, we would understand that it doesn't impact anyone except for the one who voluntarily submits to the laws of Islam. And that's our goal for the conversation tonight, is that as you live in a society where media outlets frequently put to the phrase, watch out, Sharia law is coming to get you. Watch out, Sharia law is going to come and take over this country and they're trying to take over our land. God bless America. How do you answer this? You are the counterpoint to media. Each and every single one of you is an ambassador of Islam that sits out in the public sphere, and when misinformation comes out, you have the ability and the responsibility to correct the misconception with the people in front of you. That when your friends come to you and say, like, you're trying to put me under Sharia law, ain't you? You say, hold on, buddy, hold on. Let me explain to you how that's a misconception, how that's not true, how that's not the message of Islam. Islam in no way wants to force anyone into the process of an abusive relationship or forcing their ideology upon others. The concept of Islam is the religion that was spread by the sword is a fallacy. Islam is not the religion that was spread by the sword. Islam is the religion, the true religion that was spread by the smile. That kindness, that approach to society, that good behavior is what made people attracted to the religion of Allah. And that's what our responsibility is. So inshallah, in a few points, we're going to discuss this idea of what is Sharia, what is Sharia law, and what does it truly mean, and how does it implement in the lifestyle of Muslimin and the lifestyle of society, and then the origination of where does Sharia come from, and what is ijtihad, and what is the purpose of ijtihad, and how it's applied in our day-to-day life. With your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The verse that we began our discussion with in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse number 48. لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي مَا آتَاكُمْ. In the 48th verse of the 5th surah, Allah is explaining to the Holy Prophet, mentioning to the Holy Prophet, He says that every nation was sent with a sharia, shir'atan wa minhaja, and a path. And that we could have made you all one nation, but so that we could test you with what you've been given, you were made into different nations. Sharia in the Arabic language refers to either one of two things. One, in the older language, in the older structure of the language, it was used to refer to a way to get to water, because water is a very important thing. The other thing is, Sharia means law. So when, for example, someone tells you Sharia law is coming to get you, they're literally saying the law is coming to get you, which makes no sense. Which is why I say Sharia law in quotes, because Sharia law is just saying Sharia is law, and law is law, and law is coming. It doesn't make any sense. So it's a misnomer to begin with. That's just basically been a term that's been hijacked by media to create fear in the hearts of people. Sharia refers to a series of laws that are codification of practices and lifestyle that people use to go and complete the responsibilities of religion. Allah says, He says in the Quran, He makes a statement, Inna ad-deena 'inda Allahi Islam. That certainly that Allah only revealed one religion from Adam ila al-Khatim. The deen, the religion never changed. It was always Islam. What does that mean? What that means is that religion is a philosophy or an ideology that you accept. Sharia refers to how do we execute the faith of that ideology in our day-to-day lives. In our personal terms, we've codified this in the process of referring to usul ad-din and furu' ad-din. Usul ad-din are those fundamental philosophies of faith that exist within a heart of a person and they have no physical manifestation. When someone says, I believe in Tawheed, there's no way you can look at him and say, okay, he looks like he believes in Tawheed. He's got the signs of Tawheed on his... There's no such thing because the philosophy exists in the heart. The same way when someone says, I believe in Nabuwwat, you can't say and show me your tattoo of Nabuwwat then if you believe in Nabuwwat. There's no such thing. The philosophy exists within the heart. But what we say is when I submit to this philosophy, I then go and look for how do I execute the responsibilities for this philosophy, and that's where furu' ad-din come in and the physical actions come in. So for example, I can't see by looking at someone, he looks like someone who believes in Tawheed. But what I can do is I can see that, this is a person who prays. This is a person who fasts. This is a person who goes to Hajj. This is a person who does Amar bil Ma'ruf. This is a person who does Nahi anil Munkar. By these actions, I can make a determination of what I believe in his heart should be the philosophy of Tawheed, the philosophy of Adalat, the philosophy of Nabuwwat. That philosophy is the same from Nabi Adam ila al-Khatim. Every prophet who came preached that don't worship anyone other than the one true God. And every prophet who came said there's no way for you to recognize Allah unless if He puts someone on this earth to teach you about what Allah wants from you, and that personality was known as the Nabi. And that every prophet who came, he said, believe that on the Day of Judgment you will be held to account for the things that you do in this life. No prophet has ever come to preach about a God other than Allah. No prophet has ever come to preach about a system of accountability other than the Day of Judgment. No prophet has come and said there's any other way to recognize and approach Allah except by the teachings of the messengers that Allah has appointed on this earth. That philosophy Allah never changed. Every prophet came with the same philosophy. What changed from time to time was how that philosophy is represented in action. That the actions that are required by people to perform changed from time to time. And there were instances where this philosophy, where these actions were much more difficult. For example, there were tribes and nations that Allah created who had the responsibility to pray 100 rakat a day. There were tribes and nations that, for example, if something on your body became najis, you couldn't wash it, you had to physically remove the skin from there. You understand what that means? Have an accident in the bathroom, you get a real problem. Najasat has to be removed by removing the skin. There were nations that were also given easier responsibilities. There were nations whose responsibility, whose ibadat was to wander through the earth and look at the signs and beauty of Allah and glorify Him. There were nations that were given different responsibilities and obligations by Allah of how to manifest the faith that was in their heart. And each nation, when these responsibilities and physical actions were given, they were called the Sharia of that nation. They were called the laws, the furu' ad-din of that nation. That these are the actions that if you believe in Allah, you perform these actions, and your performance of these actions will indicate that you truly have faith in your heart. And this changed from generation to generation. The implication that contemporary society has, and the fear-mongering that contemporary society is doing, is saying that the Muslim ummah and the Muslimin are people who believe that only their Sharia should exist and that they will enforce this Sharia on every person who lives around them. And this is a fallacy. This is a lie. We don't believe in forcing our responsibilities on others. What do they mean? First off, the implication of Sharia as it's understood in media is to say that, for example, if the punishment in Islam for adultery is stoning, then no matter who you are, if you commit adultery and a Muslim has the ability to have authority and judgment over you, that he has the responsibility to stone you. If the responsibility in Islam is to keep a beard, and even if you're not a Muslim, but you live around Muslims and you don't have a beard, you deserve to be beat. If, for example, the obligation is to wear hijab and you're a person who lives in a society where Muslimin are and you don't wear this hijab, you deserve to be punished for it. This is not Islam. As a matter of fact, even in the Quran, Allah explains to Rasulullah, judge the people by their own Sharia, not by your Sharia. Judge the people by the laws that Allah sent to that nation, not by the laws that were sent to your nation. Judge with them by equity. Judge the people of the Torah by the Torah. Judge the people of the Injil by the Injil. Judge the people of the Zabur by the Zabur. And judge the Muslimin by the Quran. This is what Islam taught, and this was actually practiced in the time of Rasulullah. When we take a look and we see that even people who, when they came to Rasulullah for judgment, their judgment was passed by their book, not by the teachings of Rasulullah. How unjust would Rasulullah be that if, for example, in a Muslim nation, two Jews get into a fight or they have a problem amongst themselves? This isn't a joke, by the way. I'm not making jokes about Jewish people, okay? No joke. Serious. If two Jewish people came and they had a fight amongst themselves about a matter and an affair about themselves, why would Rasulullah judge them based upon the Quran? They would say, we don't believe in the Quran. What kind of a just person are you that you force us into your ideology as opposed to judging us by our ideology? Even Amir al-Mu'mineen, he didn't judge people by this ideology, rather he preached fairness, and to the fairness that he preached was to the extent that was things that people couldn't handle. I'll give you an example. You guys ready for an example? Is it with me? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I won't hit anyone, I promise. Why don't you guys move up a little bit so there's more space for other people. No joke, but in all honesty, there are places where you go and they make such a big space in front of the Maulana, you really worry that he's going to be throwing things at the people. I have never, while giving a lecture, hit anyone. I specified. Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he was the Khalifa, as well as the Imam, he used to wander through the areas that were under the Islamic Empire and look at the conditions of the people and deal with their affairs. And it was famous where, for example, Amir al-Mu'mineen's food was very simple. We know this. His dress was very simple. Even when he would go to the colder provinces in the north, he would come in simple clothing. And he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, it's cold here, why don't you wear thicker clothing? And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, the clothing that I wear is the clothing that the poorest of our communities can afford. When our people can afford better clothing, then I will wear better clothing. And the same thing he would say about his food. He says, the food that I eat is the same food that the poorest of our society can eat. When we raise the standard of our society that everyone eats better, then I will eat better as the leader of society as well too. In one such instance, when Amir al-Mu'mineen goes into a town, he sees a blind beggar sitting on the corner of the street of the marketplace begging. And Amir al-Mu'mineen becomes disturbed by this, and he turns to his governors and the political leaders that he had appointed in this place. He says, what's the story with this man? Why is he on the corner begging? He says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is a Christian. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, and? Well, you see, he used to be a day laborer. He used to work. But as he's gotten older, he lost his sight. And now that he's lost his sight, he's not able to work anymore. And since he ate what he worked for, and he can't work anymore, he can't eat, so he's forced to beg. That's his story. Amir al-Mu'mineen became extremely upset. He says, you mean to tell me you nation of Muslimin, took advantage of his abilities, you took the benefit of his work, you took the benefit of what he could provide for you, and now that he can't provide for you, you've cast him away and thrown him away like garbage? He says, so what if he's a Christian? He's a human being. And he's a person who is in need of assistance. From tomorrow, I demand that this person's expenses are taken care of from Baytul Mal, the government treasury, to ensure that he's not on the street and begging. The significance of the statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen was to show that it's not that the responsibility of a Muslim is only to a Muslim, or that the benefits of Islam are only for Muslimin, but rather the benefits should be extended to everybody regardless of what their faith is, and that they should be taken care of. It's not that we enforce and push our opinion on others, and nor do we ignore people based upon their need just because they're not Muslimin. We have an obligation to society and humanity to take care of humanity. But there are people who also try to abuse these systems too. There's a famous narration from our ninth Imam, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad alayhi salam. That in his time, the Khalifa had a problem. A man had been arrested for committing a sin. In some narrations, that sin was, God forbid, na'uzubillah, that he killed someone, or that he, na'uzubillah, fornicated and abused a woman in some way, and then he was caught for this action. And the man was a Christian. And when he was caught and he was brought before the Khalifa, and they were about to pass judgment on him, the Christian man suddenly went, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. You see, when you accept Islam, what happens? What happens to all of your previous sins? They're pardoned, they're forgiven. This guy thought he was swift. He says, I was a Christian, and now I'm a Muslim. So you can't punish me for the crime I did as a Muslim. So now the Khalifa started scratching his head and thinking, what do I do? So he went to his wazirs, he called his wazirs, and he says, what do we do? This man's a Christian, he was caught committing a crime, he committed a grievous crime, he was about to be punished, he said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. What do we do now? And the wazir said, smart man, set him free. And the Khalifa was like, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't seem right. So he asked his wazirs when they didn't have an answer, and he wasn't happy with the answer that he was giving them. He said, go to the son of Fatima and ask him this question. So he sent one of his wazirs to Imam al-Jawad, and when he went to Imam al-Jawad, they asked Imam al-Jawad, in this way, this man, he committed a sin, and then he got caught, and then he accepted Islam. And now the question is do we punish him for the sin that we caught him for, or do we set him free? And the Imam replied, punish him. And when he replied, punish him, the wazirs were like, what do you mean punish him? Why should we punish him? He says, the same way that when the punishment became apparent upon Fir'aun, when Fir'aun was in the middle of the sea, and the sea had parted, and then the sea was starting to come down, and Fir'aun suddenly accepted Islam and says, I believe in the God of Musa. Allah said, too late, now you've seen the punishment. Now there's no going back from it. He says, in the same way for this man, now that he's subject to punishment, now his acceptance of Islam will do him no good. He is worthy of the punishment. Punish him regardless of whether he accepts Islam or not. The point of the statement was that the man was deserving of, according to his own Sharia, of a punishment. Not of the punishment of Muslimin, but of his own Sharia. And he tried to avoid it, but the Imam is explaining that the law doesn't allow you to run away from the punishment once you've been worthy of the punishment. Once the punishment is decreed, then you have to receive it. But the point is that Sharia within itself, this codification of practice of law, is something that is independent of each individual, that each individual is subject to it of his own faith. I can't enforce my Sharia on someone who's not a Muslim. The same way someone who's not a Muslim shouldn't force his Sharia on me. Which is why in the secular society we live in, the system of governance as it's established is to say that these laws are independent of faith. Our government is famous for separation of church and state. That the law doesn't reflect the punishment of your religion, rather it reflects the law of the land, which we know according to Islam we have to respect as well. So Sharia is that which we apply to ourselves, and it's not simply about these punishments that deal with, for example, God forbid, of committing a grievous sin or something of that nature. Sharia also reflects those laws of how we govern ourselves and how we deal with ourselves. The responsibility to fast is from Sharia. The penalty for missing a fast is from Sharia. The recitation of salat is from Sharia. The qada of salat is from Sharia. All of these aspects that independently deal with my representation of my faith in my day-to-day life are what is referred to as Sharia. There is no aspect of my Sharia that forces me to push my laws onto the people around me. Now, there's a different situation where, for example, if we lived in a Muslim government and the people who lived within that Muslim state under a Muslim government made the agreement of the covenant that when we live in this land, we will live by the laws of the land. That's a different story. The environment that we live in, the idea that there can be a Sharia law that we're Muslimin or they'll start enforcing things like this on other people, no, it's not true. That's not what Islam is. The next point in our discussion, where does Sharia come from? Sharia, or the system of Islamic laws and how it's brought forth, is typically given the name of the one who originates this series of laws or who is most famously known for it. Us, for example, are typically known as, and most commonly known as, Madhab Jaffari. That's why the center is known as the Jaffari Center. Because it was Imam Sadiq alayhi salam who took the responsibility to implement and teach the system of Islamic law and how it applies to day-to-day life. Now the question comes, does that mean that the Imams before didn't teach this system, that the Imams didn't have the responsibility before or after? No. You see, when we look at the life of the Imam, the personality of the Imam is not something that's independent of the time that he lives in. Rather, the Imam is a guide who looks at the conditions of the environment of the time and provides guidance to protect the message of Islam through that time. In the time of our second Imam, the guidance and protection of Islam was by creating a treaty. The guidance and protection in the time of our third Imam was done by creating war with the Mal'un at that time. The fourth Imam through the teaching of dua and supplication. The fifth and sixth Imam spent their life in the availability and the freedom to teach the Muslimin how to establish and implement Sharia and where Islamic law comes from. There's a number of reasons of why this happened. One, if we look at it politically, we see that the dynasty of the Banu Umayyah was falling during the life of the fifth and sixth Imams, and they were weak, and the new dynasty of the Banu Abbas wasn't established, so there was no political pressure upon the Imams that prevented them from teaching freely. Another aspect that we take a look at is the societal impact of what was going on during the time of the fifth and sixth Imams. You see, during the time of the first few Imams, many people were still alive who had seen the example of the Holy Prophet. And when they had a question about what do we do, how do we practice Islam, they could go back to these people who had lived with Rasulullah, and the people would say, we saw the Holy Prophet and he behaved like this. After them was a generation known as the Tabi'een. The Tabi'een were people who, while they may not have seen Rasulullah himself, they had spent time with the companions of Rasulullah. Therefore, they were capable of teaching the rules and how Rasulullah lived. By the time period of the fifth and sixth Imam came, majority, if not almost all of these people had died. We know one of the exceptions was Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari, who was alive until the life of the fifth Imam. But as more and more of these people passed away who had seen how Rasulullah practiced Islam, questions started coming up. What do we do when we have a question about how do I fast, how do I pray? And this was the time of the 5th and 6th Imam, where they could take the time to sit there and explain and teach, one, what was the law, and two, how to derive the law. How to take law from the hadith of Rasulullah, and how to take law from the Quran. And they went through and established and laid out these fundamentals. Which is why we become known as Madhab Jaffari, because majority of our laws derive back to the ahadith and teachings that came from our 6th Imam during that time. So we become known as the school of the Jaffari school of thought. Amongst the Ahl Sunnah, there are 4 popular schools of thought that were established around this time. And there were many other smaller schools of thought that did not become popular, that didn't last and didn't remain as big as these 4 major schools of thought. And the 4 major schools of thought in the Ahl Sunnah describe how their law is derived and how they make laws about their day-to-day Islam. So we have the fundamentals of law that were laid out from these ahadith and teachings and how to derive these teachings from our 6th Imam. And the A'imma alayhim salam after our 6th Imam went through the process of teaching us that in the future, when a time will come that you can't ask the Imam a question, how do you derive Islamic law? How do you come to the conclusion of what your responsibility is to have and to be able to perform your responsibilities within Islam? Now, we take a look and we see at the next point that what is ijtihad? And that ijtihad, typically in our contemporary environment, refers to referring back to a scholar in the absence of the Imam, who will explain to you what your religious responsibility is in the absence of the Imam being present. You're still with me? We're good? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Running short on time, so we'll make this relatively brief. When you look at the history of Madhab Ja'fari, there's a period of time where our ulama used to say ijtihad is haram. And then about 700 years ago, 750 years ago, they started saying ijtihad is wajib. Now some people, for example, who read history and they look at history, they look at this and they say that at some point in time, 750 years ago, someone came in and corrupted this religion and made something that was haram all of a sudden wajib. And that all of the Shia now have gone astray. And that they're wrong to do ijtihad. This interpretation that ijtihad is haram and that people have gone astray is an incorrect interpretation. One of the books that was written by Shaheed Muhammad Baqir as-Sadr, rahmatullah alayh, which is known as, popularly in Arabic, as Halaqat fil Usul. It's translated into English as the Principles of Jurisprudence as taught by Shaheed Muhammad Baqir as-Sadr. This work is in 3 volumes. And in the contemporary process of the Hawza, to understand how to derive law in Usul al-Fiqh, it is one of the most important and widely taught books about understanding the rules of how Islamic law is derived. These 3 volumes are amazing. But the first volume is something that's written at a level that everyone in society can read and lays out the principles of why this science exists and why it's necessary. And in the first book, Shaheed Muhammad Baqir Sadr goes through the explanation of what happened to the term ijtihad in tarikh and why ijtihad is wajib now and why ijtihad was haram before. And it's a book that's available in English. You can find it on Amazon, you can find it in different places. Principles of Jurisprudence, Shaheed Muhammad Baqir Sadr, Volume 1. Volume 2 is a book that's under 200 pages long, but the explanation of that second book takes over 4 volumes by some contemporary ulama to explain it. In Volume 3, to explain what he wrote in 1 volume in Volume 3, over 25 volumes have been written by some scholars to try and explain what Shaheed Muhammad Baqir Sadr was talking about. So Volume 2 and 3 are very deep and they take a lot of research and you need to have a good teacher to explain them to you. But Volume 1 is something that is palatable by most people. In this book, Shaheed Muhammad Baqir Sadr talks about the idea of what the term ijtihad means and what it used to mean. In the Arabic language, the same as in many different languages, a word over a period of time can change its meaning. Let me give you an example. Today, when I say mouse, the image that comes to your mind is a computer mouse, typically. Move your mouse. You don't think that there's some mouse over there that I need to go get and move from one location. You think of my computer mouse. What we would say is that over a period of time with the advent of computers, this term's commonly understood meaning has changed from a little rodent
to being something that's attached to a computer and I use it to move a cursor around on the screen. In the same sense, in the Arabic language, there are many terms that over a period of time change their meaning. Another example would be the term salat. That salat, prior to the advent of Rasulullah, referred to the concept of simply supplication. After the time of Rasulullah, when someone mentioned salat, the image that came to your mind was specifically the 5 daily prayers that we perform. In the same sense, the word ijtihad, at the advent of the time of Islam until about 700 years after the time of Rasulullah, implied utilizing your own opinion in an affair. For example, when there was a discussion with the second Khalifa that Rasulullah used to perform an action one way and you are suggesting to perform it another way, he would say, ذَاكَ كَانَ اجْتِهَادَ النَّبِي وَهَذَا اجْتِهَادِي. That was the opinion of Rasulullah, this is my opinion. And I want you to follow my opinion, not the opinion of Rasulullah, na'uzu billah. As long as this term ijtihad means using your opinion to derive and come to a conclusion about Islamic law, it was deemed haram, that you can't use your opinion to come to a ruling on Islamic law. As we mentioned, Islamic law can only be derived by the use of Quran, Hadith, Aql and Ijma. And that anyone who used anything other than this, it was considered haram. To the extent where, for example, the conversation happened that when Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib went to war with Muawiyah, that in that war the question was asked, who is right and who is wrong? And they said they're both right. And we said, how is that possible? They can both be right. He said, Ali ibn Abi Talib acted according to his ijtihad, and therefore Allah can't punish him because he was a mujtahid. He was able to use his opinion. And Muawiyah Mal'un used his ijtihad, and therefore he was right, and Allah can't punish him either. Therefore they were both right. Because they were mujtahideen who practiced their ijtihad. Meaning they were people who were entitled to have an opinion, and they used their opinion to derive law. And we said this was haram. And about 750 years after the advent of Islam, around the time of Allama Hindi, the term of ijtihad changed to one of the other meanings and became popular under its other meaning of known as one who strives and searches in the way of finding the truth. And when it became and said that a mujtahid now doesn't mean someone who practices opinion, but rather it means someone who struggles and strives to determine what it is that Allah wants from him, we said this ijtihad is wajib and that this ijtihad must be followed. So the change in the reading of the history of Islam from where ijtihad went from being haram to where ijtihad became wajib wasn't that there was a corruption in the religion of Islam, but rather that the meaning of the term changed, and once it changed, it became wajib upon us to follow it. A mujtahid in contemporary times is someone who goes back to the sources of Quran and Hadith and derives what is the hukum, what is the reality that Allah wants from us. Briefly again, when we talk about this, it's the example that, for example, it's time to pray. And I'm at a distance that I could either be qasr or tamam, and I don't know. A mujtahid says, when you meet this criteria, if you pray qasr, you have done what Allah asked you to do. And if you pray tamam, then you have not done what Allah asked you to do. And the mujtahid says, I am the one who takes the responsibility for this statement, and one who acts according to my ruling. I will take responsibility in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment, that if you made a mistake, the mistake is on my neck and not yours. This kind of a responsibility became wajib upon all of the Muslimin to go and to strive and learn all of the rulings that are pertaining to their religion. And if they couldn't learn them themselves, that they went and they followed someone who could go and do this derivation. The discussion around this can be very lengthy, and inshallah if we have time and tawfiq we'll discuss tomorrow. But understand something, that the searching for the laws of Islam is not something that's restricted to you, but that all of the pious people in the history of Islam were individuals who practiced and learned and spent their time and the energies of learning about Islam. Even when we look at, for example, a personality like Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Tonight, when our intention is to mention the Messiah of Abu al-Fadl, first you have to understand that what is this Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas? You see, one of the titles, the most famous title of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is Babul Hawa'ij, the gateway through which your prayers are answered. Meaning that if you have a haja or you have something that you need and you want, and you yourself are incapable of receiving it from Allah, Hazrat Abbas is such a wasila or connection that if you should ask by the right of Abul Fadl, Allah will give it to you. This title is shared by a ma'soom, our seventh Imam. Our seventh Imam, Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, is known as Babul Hawaj. The fact that someone who is not ma'soom, is not an Imam, has been raised to a level that he has been given the title that is shared by a ma'soom is not a normal characteristic. To assume that Hazrat Abbas reached this level simply because of his bravery on one day, or he reached this level simply because he was a good fighter, is an injustice to Hazrat Abbas. Hazrat Abbas was not just simply a brave warrior, he was also someone who was a faqih, who was knowledgeable in the Quran, who knew the teachings of Islam and was a teacher of the religion of Islam for people. He possessed all of these characteristics, and that's what made him so great to be able to stand up and be a supporter of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. To understand what is the status of Hazrat Abbas, sometimes people try and explain how great Hazrat Abbas was and they fall short of this. Sometimes they say, for example, when the first skirmish happened between the two armies, the army of Yazid and the army of Imam al-Hussein, 10 of the companions of Imam al-Hussein had been circled by the army of Yazid. And when it seemed that they were going to be killed by this army, one Hazrat Abbas came and freed all 10 of these people and brought them back to the army of Imam Hussein. So they say that this one Hazrat Abbas was the equivalent or was greater than 10 soldiers, that he could bring back 10 soldiers where they could not come back from. Others, for example, say the might of Hazrat Abbas and the greatness of Hazrat Abbas in a battlefield is described that when he attacked Furat, 4,000 soldiers in front of Furat scattered in fear from his sword. And I say that Abul Fadl was the equivalent of 4,000 men. No, Abul Fadl was even greater than that. You see, on the day of Ashura, Imam Zainul Abidin explained, my father fought 72 times. That every time a shaheed would fall, my father, Imam Hussein, would run into the battlefield to retrieve the shaheed. But whenever Imam Hussein went out into the battlefield to retrieve a shaheed, who was the one who was responsible for taking care of the tents? You see, Hazrat Abbas was given the position as being the commander of the army of Imam Hussein. Because as long as Imam Hussein was alive, no one dared to even approach the tents of Abu Abdullah. The whole army stood away from the tents of Abu Abdullah to where one of the Mu'arrikheen described that Hazrat Abbas, since he wasn't allowed to enter into the battlefield by Imam Hussein, he would stand in front of the tents and wave his sword and his spear and say, why don't you come and challenge me? Why do you fear me? Come to Abbas, let me have you. And the entire army would stay away from the tents because this one Hazrat Abbas as a supporter of Imam Hussein was so great that the entire army of Yazid says, we don't want to fight Abbas. This was the status of the personality of Hazrat Abbas. This is why when Amir al-Mu'mineen was on his bed of shahadat, as we mentioned in the beginning, Sayyidah Zainab comes to him and she says to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, O father, I have heard a narration from Fidda. And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, it is as you have heard, O Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab says, no, but I want to hear it from you, Baba. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, Zainab, there will come a day of great difficulty upon you. And on that day, you will lose everyone and you will be in a state of great difficulty. And on that day, I don't want you to curse anyone and I want you to be patient. She says, Baba, Fizza told me that they will even take our rida from us and they will take our chadar. Amir al-Mu'mineen with tears in his eyes says, yes, Zainab, it's true. Sayyidah Zainab turned and she says, well, Baba, one who has a brother like Abbas, how is it possible for anyone to touch my chadar? Amir al-Mu'mineen said, hi Zainab, that will be the day of difficulty when even Abbas will not be with you. You see, Hazrat Abbas was the guarantor of the hijab of the women, which is why Abu Abdullah said, oh Abbas, you don't fight, all you do is you stand here. As long as you stand in front of these tents, all of the women have security that no one can touch them. That security, Abbas, is greater to me than the attacking of these armies and these personalities. So you stay and you fulfill your oath. Abu al-Fadl bared patiently on the day of Ashura. Remember, the birth of Abu al-Fadl was what? Amir al-Mu'mineen went to his brother Aqil and said, Aqil, you are the knower of lineages of the Arab. I want to marry into a family that will produce for me a very brave son who will be like me, so that on the day of Ashura, there will be my representative who will be the sacrifice presented before Hussein ibn Ali. And Aqil said, there is the family of Kilabiyya, and in their family is a girl by the name of Fatima. And this Fatima is from the bravest of families, and there is no lineage finer than her. Amir al-Mu'mineen married Fatima bint Kilabiyya, or Fatima Kilabiyya, with the basis that a brave Shuja'a warrior would be born who would present his sacrifice in the field of Karbala. And Abu al-Fadl was created to fight and as a warrior, which is why they said when he would sit on a horse, his feet would almost touch the ground. That his stature was such that simply by looking at him, the army was afraid to be in his range of approach. And on the day of Ashura, as each one went to present their sacrifice, Abu al-Fadl would ask permission. Mawla, give me permission. You have spent all of your companions. Hura is gone. Zuhair is gone. Muslim bin Awsaja is gone. Habib is left you. Give me permission, my heart burns. I was born with the purpose to represent and fight on this day. But Imam Hussein would say, Abbas, you are the guarantor of the hijab of Zainab. Your position is in front of these tents. I can't give you permission. I don't give you permission to go fight because as long as Abbas you are here, there is no one who will bother these women. Even then, Abu al-Fadl picked up the pieces of Qasim alayhi salam and he asked, Oh my master, such a sacrifice has been presented before you. My heart burns. Give me the permission. Abbas, you don't have permission. The sacrifice of Awn and Muhammad was presented. Permission was not given. But look how great the status of Sakina is, that when Sakina becomes the wasila, Abbas receives permission. Sakina, in the confidence of her uncle, she says, I possess such an uncle that if he should want to take water, no one can stop him. The children, you are thirsty, my uncle is the one who will bring water. That Abbas comes with the wasila from Sakina that I need to bring water for the children of Abu Abdullah. And now Abu Abdullah lowers his head and says, Abbas, you have my permission. But you have my permission to bring water, not to fight freely in the battlefield. Therefore, Abu al-Fadl is given the permission and he attacks the army. Now, there are many lies that are told about the personality of Abu al-Fadl. Sometimes they say that Abu al-Fadl had 3 brothers with him in Karbala. He sent them to fight first so that since he had children, the inheritance of his brothers would come to him. Now, a personality like Abu al-Fadl doesn't believe like that. The same way they say when Abu al-Fadl attacked the river, that he spread the army far and wide and he captured the Furat in his attack. In his first effort, they say that he attacked, that he killed 80 men in one approach to the water. And that when he reached the water, the army of Yazid had scattered away from the water. And they make a lie. They say that Abbas in this instance took the water in his hand and wanted to drink it. And by embarrassment of the water in his hand that his master was thirsty, he didn't drink it. Rather, we would say that maybe Abu al-Fadl took the water in his hand to show the army, do you think you can stop us from this water? Do you think we are afraid of you? No, if we had the permission of our master, this water is nothing for us to capture. But Abu al-Fadl fulfilled his promise and took the water. Now when he took the water, the Mal'un amongst themselves began to discuss, Hussein has been thirsty for 3 days and we can't stop his supporters. If this water was to reach the lips of Hussein ibn Ali, we would be in great danger. Do whatever you can to stop this, Abbas, and don't let that water reach Hussein ibn Ali. So then they began to fight Abu al-Fadl in an unfair manner. Someone came from the right and attacked him from secrecy, someone from the left, until they cut one arm of Abu al-Fadl. Abu al-Fadl continued forward and he says, you may cut my right arm, but I will continue. They cut the left arm of Abu al-Fadl. He continued on fighting. The Mu'arrikheen write that eventually they struck Abu al-Fadl on the top of his head and that he fell from his horse. Al-Baneen, when she heard of the shahadat of her son, she said, but my Abbas was so tall. How did they manage to strike my son on his head to make him fall from his horse? Oh Al-Baleen, if you would have seen Abbas, after they cut his right hand, after they cut his left hand, Abbas continued forward. They had no recourse. They stood from far away and shot arrows at your son. Hurmala narrates, I shot the arrow that pierced the water skin of Abbas. And when the water drained, it was as if the life drained from Abbas. They continued to shoot arrows at your son, Al-Baleen, until one mal'oon shot an arrow in the eye of Abu al-Fadl. Abu al-Fadl in this condition, he has no hands left, wants to remove the arrow to clear the blood to continue to Abu Abdullah. Abu al-Fadl in this condition lowered his head to remove the arrow with his knees. In this condition, a mal'oon came and struck your son Abu al-Fadl on the head. Abbas fell. When a man falls from his horse, he keeps his hands to keep him steady. Al-Baleen, your madloom had no hands. When he fell, the army encircled. They said, Oh Abbas, we were afraid of you. We will ensure you will not get up. They began to attack him with his swords. They began to desecrate his body. Abu Abdullah, seeing Abbas fall, came running to Abbas. Abu Abdullah narrates, he says, when I came to Abbas, I found him on the ground. I cleared away the enemies, and my brother lying on the ground with blood in his eyes, I heard him say, O enemies of Islam, I know you want to kill me, but give me some time. Let me bid farewell to Hussein, then you may kill me. Abu Abdullah came, took the head of his brother in his lap, cleared the blood from his eyes. Abbas, Hussein has come to you. Abu al-Fadl removed his head from the lap of Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein took the head of Imam Hazrat Abbas in his lap again. Abbas again removed it. Abbas, you are on the verge of death. Why do you not let me comfort you in this moment? Abu al-Fadl says, Oh brother, when Baba passed away, when Baba was Shaheed, Imam Hassan's lap was there and Imam Hassan comforted him. When Imam Hassan became Shaheed, you comforted him. Brother, I am embarrassed that how can you comfort me? Who will comfort you? In whose lap will your head be, my brother? Leave me like this. Abu Abdullah said, brother, do you have any final requests? Hazrat Abbas said, brother, don't take me back to the tents. The women are counting on me to be their protection. Sakina is waiting for water. She was proud of her uncle. It will be too much. She will become frightened by the fact of my body. They have desecrated me. Leave me here. Abu Abdullah says, as you wish, brother, I leave you here. Al-an ankasara dhahri. Abbas, your leaving has broken my back. They said Abu Abdullah left his brother by Furat. When he returned to the tents, he stood before his tents alone with no supporter. He called out, Hal min nasirin yansurna. Zainab, hearing the sound of the grief of her brother, came, Oh Bhaiya, as long as Abbas was alive, you did not call like this. Where is my brother Abbas? Where has he gone? Abu Abdullah did not have the words to say this. They said Abu Abdullah entered the tent. He went to the tent of Abu al-Fadl and he knocked down the pole in the middle of the tent. As the tent fell, the scream of Zainab came, my brother Abbas is no more. Baba, today your promise has been made true. Zainab has been left alone. على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We raise our hands in dua. ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. Ya Allah, 10 times. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Mahmoud بحق محمد. يا أعلى بحق علي. يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة. يا محسن بحق الحسن. يا كديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Oh Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Oh Allah, there have those who have come here with hajat. بحق باب الحوائج, fulfill their hajat. Oh Allah, those amongst our community who are sick, khususan, there is a brother who is in a condition of death and is asking for your dua by the name of Askar Ali Hassan Ali. Please keep him in your du'as. Oh Allah, give shifa to all of the mu'mineen. Oh Allah, there are those who live in states of fear and difficulty. Remove their fear, remove their difficulties. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Oh Allah, give us shifa of Ahlul Bayt in dunya and akhirah, and allow us to be the supporters of Imam al-Zaman, the way Abu al-Fadl was the supporter of Imam Hussein. Rahimullah man yakra' surat al-Fatiha ma'as salawat.